XYZ monsters have a long history of using alternative summoning conditions, thanks to spells like their rank up magics, to their own inherent effects to rank up, to even archetype specific cards that will summon an XYZ monster, bypassing the usual mechanics. So today we'll go over the best monsters like this that have their own built-in alternative summoning conditions. And at number 10, we have DDD Deviser King Des Machinex. This is a rank 10 Fiend Dark Pendulum monster with 3000 attack and defense, and 10 for its pendulum scale. Its pendulum effect lets you special summon another monster from your other pendulum zone by swapping it out with a monster in your graveyard or on your field. For its regular effects, first you can bypass its XYZ material requirement of 2 level 10 Fiend monsters, and instead XYZ summon it by using any other DDD monster you control as its material, with the limitation that you can only have one Machinex in your monster zone at a time. Its next effect is, once per chain, when a monster your opponent controls activates its effect, you can detach 2 materials from Machinex or destroy a dark contract card you control, and attach that monster that activated its effect to Machinex as one of its materials. Finally, during your standby phase, you can place Machinex in your pendulum zone. In an archetype filled with all sorts of unique, powerful boss monsters like DDD, Machinex stands supreme as one of the best and most versatile. DDD has a certain reputation historically for being an incredibly elaborate combo deck, filled with spreadsheets of different combo lines to get crazy first turn boards filled with negates from cards like DDD Wave King Caesar or DDD Curse King Siegfried. But the later addition of Machinex gave the deck a very powerful form of non-negation interaction, letting you punish your opponent's monster effects and functionally remove that monster from rotation by attaching it as a material. After all, lots of monsters when negated and destroyed can get value in the graveyard, but none really do anything when gobbled up as a material. The most important thing about Machinex is just how easy it is to summon. In DDD, it basically lets you turn any leftover extenders on your field you use to set up your board into insanely powerful interaction, whether it's a turn 1 end board piece or a going second piece tool for breaking a board. So even if your combo gets hand trapped to oblivion, a DDD usually has Machinex to fall back on, so as long as they can get a dark contract in the field and overlay Machinex into one of their monsters left over. Usually a DDD Abyss King Gilgamesh, who was a prime target for a hand trap. Even outside of DDD, Machinex has seen a lot of play recently as a generic and powerful splash for Unchained. Its typing as a Fiend type lets it play well with the archetype, and thanks to DDD Vice King Requiem being searchable by Dark Contract with the gate, and being able to summon itself for free, suddenly that one Dark Contract threatens a full active Machinex who can both remove threats, threaten to beat over monsters with its massive stat line, or even just threaten making Zeus if it can attack into anything at all. While DDD's competitive stake has been on the fringe of the meta for years, it's easy to spot that Machinex is by far the deck's best monster amongst a whole list of powerful bosses, and its ability to cheat itself out so trivially makes it good in even other decks. Right in at number 9, we have Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. This is a rank 8 Dark Machine monster with 2600 attack. Its alternative summoning condition is you can XYZ summon it by just using an Orcust Link monster as its material instead. When Dingirsu is special summoned, you can do one of 2 effects: send one card your opponent controls to the graveyard, or attach one of your banished machine monsters to Dingirsu as a material. Also, if any cards you control would be destroyed while you have Dingirsu through either battle or effect, you can detach one material from it instead. Dingirsu is the staple boss monster of the Orcust archetype. As a threat, it paved the way in the extra deck for one of the most powerful kinds of effects, which is a removal effect that both doesn't target and doesn't destroy the affected card. This made Dingirsu one of the best answers for any kind of threat on the field going second, but it also made its stake as a going first tool. Thanks to Galatea, the Orcust automaton, summoning Dingirsu from your extra deck was entirely trivial for Orcust. So trivial that tons of different dark monster based stacks like Lunalights and Dark Worlds would splash a small Orcust shell just to have access to a monster like Dingirsu. Galatea could search out Orchestrated Babel, which would give all your Orcust monsters on the field and in the graveyard the ability to use their effects as quick effects. This would enable Orcust Symbol Skeleton to special summon Dingirsu from the graveyard as a quick effect on your opponent's turn. Considering you are already going into Galatea just to make Dingirsu in the first place, this entire combo line was very efficient and self-contained, and formed the backbone of Orcust as a long-time tier 1 strategy that still has cards banned to this day. Dingirsu is also great outside of its ability to cheat its summoning condition. Being a powerful rank 8 is good enough all on its own for certain decks, like modern punk builds who have easy access to multiple level 8 monsters through Foxy Tune and Ogre Dance. Its ability to remove threats and protect itself also makes it great at enabling Zeus, giving it double duty as a board breaker in rank 8 decks. Dingirsu is just an all-around great card with its multiple great effects for tons of strategies, but its ability to bypass its nature as an XYZ monster and work well with the Link summoning side of Orcust earns it a spot on this list. And at number 8 on this list, we have Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal. This is a rank 6 light fairy monster with 2500 attack. Beatrice's form of alternative summoning lets you XC summon by sending one Burn and Abyss monster from your hand to the graveyard, and then using one Dante monster you control as its material. Though if you do use this alternative summoning method, you cannot use Beatrice's main effect in the same turn, which is a quick effect to detach material and send one card from your deck to the graveyard. Also, if Beatrice is destroyed by your opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one Burning Abyss monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. It's fairly obvious why Beatrice is a great card in Burning Abyss. Her ability to send cards from the deck to the graveyard as a quick effect can give the deck a lot of resource generation off of cards like Seer, or even use it as a piece of interaction by sending a Farfa to let you banish a monster for a turn. Burning Abyss has one of the longest and most storied competitive histories of any deck. The fact that Beatrice represents a ton of value on top of the milling value of Dante traveling the Burning Abyss already gets you a big reason why the deck persisted for years past its first stint of tier 1 playability. That said, Beatrice is a bit more powerful than just that. The card's main effect is not just good, it's bannably powerful. Monsters like Lavalval Chain and Curious Lightsworn Dominion both populate the ban list as accessible extract monsters with the same effect to send any card from your deck to the graveyard. Beatrice only escapes this fate because it's historically been a bit harder to make a rank 6 than a rank 4 or Curious's more stringent link requirements. Still, this hasn't stopped Beatrice from being a mainstay in multiple dominant decks in the past. Drytron used it to both access any Drytron name in deck on turn 1, or, if you didn't need it, to send an Eva to the graveyard and then use its graveyard effect to add 2 level 2 or lower light fairy monsters from your deck to your hand to fuel Herald of Ultimateness for a ton of negates. The fact that Beatrice is a quick effect meant you could also do this on your opponent's turn, converting 2 Evas into 4 negates for your Herald, or a bunch of hand traps like Herald of the Orange Light. Most recently, Beatrice saw an upsurge in play because of the release of the Bestials, who are all level 6 powerful in their own right, and worked well in decks that love sending cards straight to the graveyard. Tier limits. We've talked about tier limits a lot on this channel recently, but to make a long story short, Beatrice represents 2 tier limit fusions effects on its own when made summonable by the Bestials and Garura, giving the deck powerful extension and powerful interaction all in one monster thanks to its quick effect nature. You could use it to fuse once on your turn and once on your opponent's turn, and anyone who's seen a tier limit combo knows just how powerful that can be. Beatrice is just an all-around amazing monster. And, funnily enough, its alternative summoning condition only was incredibly useful in the deck Beatrice was designed to be in, but unimportant everywhere else where it was abused to its fullest extent. Still one of the best Xyz monsters ever, and definitely one of the best with a distinct way to summon itself. And at number 7, we have Expurrely Noir. This is a rank 7 Dark Fairy monster. Noir's unique summoning condition is that you can XC summon it using any rank 2 monster with 5 or more materials, as opposed to 2 level 7 monsters. While Noir has 5 or more materials, it's unaffected by the activate effects of your opponent's cards. Also, it can detach 2 materials to target any card in your opponent's field or in the graveyard and place it on the bottom of their deck, with this being a quick effect so as long as Noir has a level 1 purely monster as one of its materials. Expurrely Noir is one of the most powerful boss monsters ever printed. As of this video, Purely is one of the best decks in both the TCG and OCG, and that's almost entirely because of how Noir converts the deck's main strategy of stacking its memory quick play spells on its rank 2 Xyz monsters as materials, granting them tons of powerful secondary effects, like how Delicious Memory gives the deck OTK power by giving the monsters attached to multiple attacks, or how Pretty Memory gives it ability to attach an opponent's card to it as an Xyz material. And while this is the core of a competent strategy in its own right, Expurrely Noir takes it to an entirely different level. Being completely unaffected by cards, often dubbed as being a Towers monster, in reference to Apocryphal Towers, means this card is hard to deal with, short of something like a Kaiju. And while being hard to answer is great, Noir has something fairly unique for a modern boss monster. Its point of interaction is not a hard once per turn. Most modern Yu-Gi-Oh cards with similarly powerful effects, especially ones that are quick effects, can usually only do these effects once per turn to maintain a level of balance. But since Purely as an archetype is designed to put all their eggs into one basket, Noir's quick effect ability to put troublesome cards on the bottom of the deck can be used multiple times in one turn. While it does risk removing Noir's self-protection to use the effect, when timed correctly, a couple of uses of such a powerful form of removal is usually enough to completely hamstring an opponent's ability to deal with Noir. Conceptually, Noir is really never summoned besides using its alternative summoning condition. While rank 7s do have some level of support, the card really only functions with an absurd amount of materials that only Purely can produce, and only gets its quick effect removal with overlaying on top of other Purelis. The entire Purely archetype, despite nominally being an Xyz archetype, basically cheats out every one of its Xyz monsters thanks to the effects of Purely and Purely bypassing their typical rank 2 designations. And Noir takes the concept to its highest level, being the strongest monster in one of the best current decks, all about ignoring typical Xyz summoning conventions. And overlaying to number 6 on this list, we have Divine Arsenal AA-ZEUS Sky Thunder. This is a rank 12 light machine monster with 3000 attack and defense. Zeus's alternative summon condition is that you can overlay it on top of any Xyz monster you control, so as long as any Xyz monster has been involved in a battle this turn. Zeus has 2 other effects, with the main important one being that as a quick effect, it can detach 2 materials from itself to send all other cards in the field to the graveyard. Its second effect, often humorously called Zeus's hidden effect, is that once per turn, if another card you control is destroyed by battle or opponent's card effect, you can attach 1 card from your hand, deck, or X deck to it as a material. We've already mentioned Zeus a few times on this list, often talking about the fact that an Xyz monster that can stack a ton of materials or safely tangle in the battle phase is great for setting up Zeus, because Zeus's incredible board wiping capability isn't a hard once per turn. Stacking tons of extra materials on it lets you use it multiple times in a single chain, often letting Zeus completely push through your common negation effects that might thwart it. Zeus is, at this point, the most prolific Xyz monster ever. Every single deck that has any sort of Xyz presence in the extra deck is likely to always be playing Zeus, as it single-handedly turns the battle phase into a functional way to deal with an established board when going second, as thanks to cards like Downed Magician, any rank 3 or lower Xyz monster can suddenly stack 4 materials under Zeus. This gives you both a board wipe and one of the most powerful quick effect interactions ever printed to disrupt your opponent's next turn. Zeus has completely redefined the way Yu-Gi-Oh players play the game, often having to make a snap decision about leaving monsters in attack so a weak Xyz monster can't crash into them to make Zeus, while risking being punished by the ever-present lightning storm blowing away all their attack position monsters. How good decks are at going second in the modern metagame is oftentimes just how effectively the deck can enable a Zeus line, either with direct attacks or monsters that are just hard to kill before ranking up. Zeus is arguably the most powerful going second card in the history of the game, due to how easy it is to access thanks to its unique summoning condition, how absurdly powerful its effect is, and the fact that it's basically impossible for any decent strategy to make it going first. So Konami could really crank up the power level on a monster that's only relevant on turn 2 or later. If it weren't for this last fact, Zeus might even be worth eyeing as a potential ban list target. But so long as there's not a dominant rank 12 engine in the game, let's all just be happy that Zeus is here to make going second not so impossible as it might sometimes appear. And at number 5 on this list, we have number 95 Galaxy Eyes Dark Matter Dragon. This is a rank 9 Dark Dragon monster with a whopping 4000 attack to complement its 0 defense. Its special way to summon itself is that you can overlay it into a Galaxy Eyes Xyz monster as an Xyz material. When you do Xyz summon Dark Matter Dragon, you send 3 dragons with different names from your deck to the graveyard as a cost, and then your opponent banishes 3 monsters from their deck. It can also detach a material to attack 2 monsters during the battle phase. Dark Matter Dragon is basically what got the Dragon Rulers finally put behind the ban list, as 1 month after its release, they finally all got banned thanks to this behemoth sending 3 different ones to the graveyard. And since it's sent for cost, it's not like you could even use an effect veiler on it. Once it was summoned, the game was likely all over. This immediately turned any deck that could put a rank 8 strategy together into a huge threat to swarm the board with all sorts of degenerate combos. It was problematic with other banned or errata dragon monsters like Eclipse Wayward and Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. If that wasn't enough, this effect doesn't even have a hard once per turn. So if your combo is set up for even more level 8 monsters, you could just keep going into this over and over. Even its attack line was nothing to scoff at, as while you were definitely playing Dark Matter Dragon for its effect, having a 4000 attack double attack on the field was a great way to finish off your opponent back in 2015, before the pace of play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Took a drastic jump forward a couple of years later. That said, when the Dragon Rulers were banned, Dark Matter Dragon's insane triple Dragon Meal effect wasn't quite so busted, and it only saw a smattering amount of play in various stacks for some years afterwards. Outside of Dragon Rulers, Dark Matter Dragon saw its first long-term home in Blue Eyes White Dragon decks, as thanks to a ton of legacy support, the deck had a decent stint competitive success back in 2016. And with cards like Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon and Return of the Dragon Lords, getting out a couple of level 8 monsters of the field to access a rank 8 Galaxy Eyes monster to fulfill Dark Matter's summoning condition wasn't so hard. It took a handful more years, but when Konami started releasing more and more powerful dragon support like the entire modern Thunder Dragon archetype, and the pieces of what would eventually become Dragon Link like the Rockets and the Guard Dragons, people started rightfully eyeing Dark Matter Dragon for a return to prominence. Thanks to monsters like Thunder Dragon Duo and Chaos Dragon Levineer, suddenly these already insane powerful level 8 monsters could extend a preposterously broken and beefy extra deck monster that filled up the entire graveyard with powerful dragons that would give you advantage like Arcbrave Dragon, Destrudo, and the aforementioned Eclipse Wyvern. It wasn't long into Thunder Dragon's existence that Dark Matter Dragon finally took its rightful place on the ban list. And just looking at how powerful modern Dragon Link variants have become, often entirely due to how it plays out of the graveyard with its many dragons, it's likely a very good decision this mass graveyard dumping monstrosity isn't wreaking havoc. Ranking at the number 4 spot on this list, we have Kashtira Arise-heart. This is a dark Machinex with 3000 attack and defense. Its alternative summon condition is you can overlay Arise-heart onto any Kashtira monster you control, so as long as Kashtira Shangri-Ra activates its effect in the same turn, transferring any materials over to Arise-heart in the process. Arise-heart has 3 more effects not related to its summoning. First, while Arise-heart is on the field, any card that would be sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Second, with only a once per chain restriction, each time a card is banished, you can attach 1 banished card to Arise-heart as its material. Finally, with an actual hard once per turn, Arise-heart can detach 3 materials to target 1 card in the field and banish it face down. Arise-heart is one of the best archetypal boss monsters ever. Its double 3000 stat line makes it imposing to deal with in battle, whether it's attack or defense, which is a big deal considering it's a walking macrocosmos effect on the field. This floodgate shuts down a large number of decks, as Arise-heart's prominence in the metagame made any decks with graveyard synergies significantly less playable. It also comes equipped with one of the best removal abilities in the game by banishing any card in the field face down. Banishing face down is the closest thing Yu-Gi-Oh has to completely removing a card from the game for good, but funnily enough, Arise-heart's other effects counteracts this. Being able to attach banished cards is fairly important for Arise-heart, as it lets you get back your own banished face down monsters, fairly important in the mirror match, where Kashtira monsters are constantly banishing cards, as well as refuel Arise-heart's materials thanks to the rather high cost of its banishing effect needing to detach 3 cards. This lets you do things like infinitely recycle Kashtira monsters if you didn't need to use Arise-heart's effect on your opponent. As an example, you can banish your own Kashtira Unicorn, reattach it to Arise-heart with its effect, then later use it as material for another banish, and suddenly you now have a phase of Unicorn rotation for a recursion card like Kashtira Birth. Arise-heart is so powerful, it doesn't really matter if you're using its alternative summon condition or not, but that does let you more efficiently make Arise-heart, as you can make a Shangri-Ra as per usual, then just use Kashtira Arise-heart and its own effect to summon itself, trigger Shangri-Ra, and now you can make Arise-heart for the low cost of 1 material, overlaid it onto your Arise-heart. This does mean you usually need to banish a couple more cards in the process to get materials in Arise-heart and make its quick effect live, but that's Kashtira's specialty anyhow. Or you could just overlay Arise-heart onto Shangri-Ra itself, which would get you 3 materials to detach immediately while functionally only costing you the 2 monsters it takes to make Shangri-Ra. For a card as obscenely powerful as Arise-heart, the versatility its alternative summon condition gives it and its archetype to just adjust the power of their combos is incredible. Even without that effect, it would be an insanely strong boss monster well worth playing. But with it, it's the linchpin of one of the strongest decks ever, and as is the case for many best decks ever, that was enough to finally get it banned. Turns out, an easy to summon, incredibly high statted monster that comes equipped with a Degenerate Floodgate and one of the best interaction effects in the game, and also never runs out of materials, was a bit too good for a single Xyz monster, and makes it more than good enough for this list. Next up at number 3, we have Zoodiac Broadbull, and much like previous times Zoodiac monsters show up, this is a stand-in for basically the entire lineup of Zoodiac Xyz monsters, with the Broadbull as the stand-up as the most broken one. All the Zoodiacs share the same summoning mechanic that bypasses their Xyz requirement. Once per turn, for each different Zoodiac Xyz monster, you can overlay them onto any one Zoodiac monster you control, transferring any Xyz materials that monster had to the new one. Broadbull specifically has the fairly straightforward effect to add 1 Beast Warrior monster from your deck to your hand that can be normal summoned. This innocuous search effect doesn't seem so insane on the face of it. After all, cards like Fire Formation Tenki and Reinforcements of the Army aren't particularly problematic. But being able to, nearly 100% of the time, guarantee this effect thanks to the ease in which Zoodiacs can get monsters in the field thanks to cards like Zoodiac Barrage, meant that the deck almost always had access to the equally broken Zoodiac Ratpier. Through a combination of Ratpier's ability to conjure up the rest of his little swarm of bodies, as well as the Zoodiacs supporting this with the effects like Chakanane's easy to enable revival effect for Zoodiac monsters, when Zoodiac was at full power, it wasn't unusual to see them going +6 or 7 off of just getting Ratpier into rotation, something Broadbull always ensured. Not that the other Zoodiacs were lacking. Zoodiac Trident redefined the amount of power you can give to an incredibly easy to access extra deck monster, giving quick effect removal to any deck that can normal summon a Zoodiac, which, considering the deck was the most represented tier 0 deck of all time at the height of its dominance, was every single deck. At that time, basically every Zoodiac had a powerful and important role in their combo line. Broadbull was the starter, Chakanane was an extender, Trident was the interaction, Tiger Mortar gave you a fairly unique way to manipulate materials from one body to another, And even Hammer Kong worked to protect the investment on your board with its ability to divert targeted effects. Funnily enough, Borbo was originally the least prominent Zoodiac, as the deck was a grindy, controlling deck, and Borbo's ability to attack directly, while nifty for closing out games, wasn't super important. But cut to a few years later, and our good friend Zeus arrived on the scene, suddenly a rank 4 Xyz monster that could attack directly was in high demand. And Borbo helped catapult decks that could splash Zoodiac like Eldritch or Tri-Brigade into tier 1 contention. Heck, thanks to Chakane being a generic rank 4, any rank 4 deck that could commit 2 extra deck slots to it in Borbo had a powerful Zeus line in its back pocket, since you could generically make Chakane and then just overlay Borbo on top. The Zoodiacs as a collective are an incredibly versatile and even more broken group of monsters. An entire archetype of quote-unquote XYZ monsters who just plainly ignore the only real stipulation that XYZ summoning has, and that's what makes them so great. And with the penultimate spot on this list, we have number as 0 Utopic Zexal. This is technically a rank 1 light warrior monster, though it has no ranking stars, and its rank 1 designation is in its effect text. Its unique summoning condition is that you can discard a rank up magic spell card to XYZ summon this card over a Utopia monster you control, transferring the materials to it. It also has a very unusual requirement for its regular XYZ summoning, requiring 3 number XYZ monsters you control the same rank as its materials. Its XYZ summoning can be negated, and your opponent can't activate cards or effects when it's summoned, so keep your Solemns face down. Zexal's attack and defense are 1,000 times the number of XYZ materials it has attached to it. Finally, you can detach 1 XYZ material from Zexal as a quick effect during your opponent's turn to prevent them from activating any cards and effects for the rest of that turn. Utopic Zexal was one of the most egregiously powerful cards ever printed. Its effect functionally states your opponent can't do anything but set cards, summon monsters, and attack, as basically everything else in the game requires activating a card or effect. Funnily enough, this insane power level was originally justified. Outside of incredibly elaborate and fragile pendulum combos from the likes of Ignites, Utopic Zexal was practically impossible to summon with any consistency for years. Sure, any rank 4 could cram a Utopia and a bunch of rank up spells in it, but that was highly inconsistent, and the game's pace when Zexal first came out was just slow enough that passing on some trap cards and a set monster wasn't the end of the world back then, and filling your deck up with mediocre rank 4 strategy and a bunch of bricky rank up spells wasn't a great idea. It would eventually see more play in a more streamlined combo, where Pendulum Magician decks would use fellow members of the list Beatrice to send rank up Magic Argent Chaos Force to the graveyard on turn 1, rank up into Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger to let you use Argent Chaos Force condition to return to the hand, then use the alternative summon condition as Zexal over Utopia. But even this wasn't incredibly popular, as this combo was vying for space at the time with Pendulum FTKs. It wasn't until the later Utopia support in the form of Numeron cards like Numeron Calling and Numeron Network, as well as the ZS and ZW cards like ZS Ascended Sage release, that it became a real issue. Numeron Network and Numeron Calling could single-handedly fulfill this regular summoning condition for Zexal by just summoning a bunch of Numeron gates to the field, letting any deck functionally splash this absurd monster if it could find the extra deck space. The ZS and ZW cards both gave the Utopia decks easy rank 4 access, as well as gave the deck incredibly consistent access to rank up magic cards to fulfill Zexal's alternative summoning condition. This 1-2 combo took Zexal's difficult summoning requirements and made them trivial. And when a card this powerful is this easy to summon, it's suddenly a real issue. Zexal was banned before the full release of the ZS cards, preempting the enormous problem of consistently summoning Zexal might be for the metagame. Any super easy to summon monster that instantly ends your opponent's turn before they get to do anything is just way too good, after all. And speaking of which, finally snatching the number 1 spot on this list, we have Outer Entity Azathot. This is a rank 5 monster which requires 3 level 5 monsters as materials, but whose alternative special summoning condition works by overlaying it onto another Outer Entity XYZ monster you control, and Azathot cannot be used as materials for an XYZ summon itself, so no overlaying Zeus onto Azathot later in the turn. Azathot has 2 effects. Its far less relevant effect is that if it has a Fusion, Synchro, and XYZ monster all of its materials, you can detach a material and destroy all cards your opponent controls. And while that's certainly a powerful effect, it was rarely, if ever, used because of the inherent difficulty in making this material setup happen in the first place. The far more interesting and usable fact is that when Azathot is XYZ summoned, your opponent can activate monster effects for the rest of the turn. Maybe the most interesting thing about this effect is that, because it applies a continuous lingering effect for the rest of the turn on summon, it doesn't actually start a chain. This means that your opponent cannot possibly respond to this effect to interact with it. So no amount of omni negation or effect negation can deal with it. While you technically could activate something like Infinite Impermanence on Azathot, since it's already summoned and applying lingering effect, That wouldn't work. This is a big part of what separates Azathot from a powerful monster like the previous entry on this list, Utopic Zexal. Zexal could still be countered by cards like Infinite Impermanence or Forbidden Chalice on your turn. The uninteractability has made Azathot one of the most degenerate monsters in history for a number of reasons. Getting the obvious part out of the way, if you could XD summon Azathot on your opponent's turn, you would functionally lock them out of the game for that turn, as a vast majority of Yu-Gi-Oh decks need monster effects to do anything. Even spell-heavy archetypes like Sky Striker usually have some important monster effects they need to resolve while being supported by spells or traps. This was accomplished in the TCG in part thanks to the Phantom Knights Rank Up Magic launch, which was easily searchable off of the Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche and can rank up a dark level 4 monster with no materials into Azathot, which wasn't particularly hard to set up. A fairly generic Link 3 combined with a rank 4 and suddenly your opponent doesn't get to play the game. Every card mentioned here served time in the ban list at one point or another, as people were not big fans of being Azathot locked. More aptly for its place as number 1 on this list, one of Azathot's most broken functions is its ability to cheat its rank 5 summon with outer entity Narla. Rank 5s are a lot harder to access than rank 4s, and Narla being completely generic meant that any deck that could power hit a rank 4 could immediately turn off all monster effects for your opponent. This meant that, in a high-powered combo deck, you could make it so your opponent basically had no hand traps outside of basically infinite impermanence on your own turn 1, letting you often combo off with impunity. If this wasn't powerful enough, you could also summon it going second. This would functionally be like a more souped-up version of Darkblue No More, completely shutting off all monster-based interactions your opponent sets up if you just so happen to be able to make a rank 4. Except it's significantly better as it doesn't have the Dark Ruler's prevention of combat damage downside, letting you still have the potential to kill your opponent, and it affects every single monster effect your opponent could have and not just monsters on the field, meaning anything they could potentially summon off of a trap or any hand traps also gets shut down as you go about picking apart their board. Azathot was both one of the most degenerate auto-win combos for players going first, as well as one of the most powerful monsters you could summon going second, with both of these abuse cases revolving around bypassing its typical rank 5 designation to drop this bombshell behemoth on the field and watch your opponent incapable of doing anything. It's perhaps the best example in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh of just how good a monster can be if you give it far too easy access to bypass its summon requirements, and that earns it the top spot on this list. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other XYZ monsters with alternative summon conditions you think you may have missed, or do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, let us know down in the comments below.